Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, a show on Doordarshan, India's national broadcaster, about Indian foreign policy, India's international relations, and key thematic and real-world developments in different parts of the planet which have an impact on India's rise. Viewers, in this episode, we are taking a close look at one of the underlying themes and bedrocks of Indian foreign policy for a long time. This is the idea of strategic autonomy. Why is strategic autonomy such a fundamental pillar of Indian foreign policy? How is it manifesting in India's current diplomacy around the world? And what is the future of strategic autonomy as India rises to the status of a leading power in the world? This is the theme of today's discussion. And to take us through, let me introduce you to a very articulate and knowledgeable guest who is joining me in the studio, Dr. Anshu Joshi.
Thank you, Professor Chaulia, for inviting me to this show.
Dr. Anshu Joshi teaches at Jawaharlal Nehru University and is a prominent voice in the media and in academia. So good to have you on the show.
Thanks again, Professor Chaulia, and the topic for today's show seems to be very interesting.
Indeed, and Anshuji, often people associate strategic autonomy with the post-independence India, like, you know, then we adopted the position of non-alignment and all those things. But if you go back in time, there is a longer tradition to our statecraft, to our indigenous knowledge, our history, where the idea of a king or an emperor or a ruler maintaining autonomy and freedom from external coercion, pressure, and other forms of domination has always existed in our strategic culture, isn't it? So if you could begin by looking back at our epics and our strategic thinkers, what is your notion of how strategic autonomy has evolved from those times, from ancient era until now, and why do you think it's been such a prized concept all the way through for millennia? And what does it tell us about India or Bharat's character?
What's a beautiful question to start with, and that is what I always discuss in my classes also. The kind of world we are living into, we all know that it's multipolar. And it is characterized by a complex interdependence, wherein states, both bilaterally as well as multilaterally, connect with each other, at times disconnect also, depending on their national priorities. So it's not the same time or era as in during the times of First World War or Second World War, or for that matter Cold War, wherein the world was divided into two blocks. We have different poles of power in today's times. And today I can proudly say, being an Indian scholar, that when we look from foreign policy's point of view and when we look from global order's point of view, India stands tall as a Vishwa Bandhu, Vishwa Sakha, and we have earned that brand image by proving ourselves as a true friend of different nations coming from different blocks. And that is what we are spreading as a message also, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. We are talking about entire earth being one family. We are talking about Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina. So from where all this is coming? The roots lie in our Indian knowledge system. So when we look from diplomacy's point of view, I would like to quote Kautilya and his Arthashastra. So much before the kind of realists that we call as in the most ancient realists or political scientists, much before them, Kautilya came with Arthashastra, in which he spoke about foreign policy, he spoke about statescraft, he spoke about strategic autonomy of a state. So I will just give you an example. He talks about Saptang theory. Yeah. So 7 organs, and there 6 organs are primarily of state, and 1 is an external factor wherein he brings in foreign policy. So the king, Swami, his council of ministers, Amatyas, then Janapada, the territory, then Durg, the entire fort, then Kosh, treasury, then army, Dand, and last but not the least, the only external factor, Mitra, ally, the other nation. And that's what he says, that all these 6 would be good if the foreign policy or the relations with the ally our good. So he says that security and welfare of a nation depend on good foreign policy. And by good foreign policy, he meant that we need to respect each other's sovereignty. We need to be cooperative instead of being competitive. And then we need to come out of compartments that we usually create. So beautifully explained all these elements, and when we join them together, then we get to understand that how Kautilya explained strategic autonomy, what we are practicing today, and teaching this world to collaborate instead of competition.
And Anshuji, talking of Kautilya, the Shadgunya, the six-fold diplomatic strategy, one of the points he makes is that, Dvaidi Bhava, which is the idea that you ally with one king in order to counterbalance another king, or to check the aggression of another king, that is always preferred to Samshraya, which is the idea that you take shelter or refuge, or what in today's term we call bandwagoning, or surrendering to a more powerful country. It's quite clear that he is very conscious of the relative power differences between empires and kings, and he's always talking about the sovereign should make a choice where the autonomy is preserved at all costs, or to the extent possible, given the power differences. And so the option for Samshraya or bandwagoning, or giving up completely, or surrendering, or becoming a junior partner to a more powerful, is only for the very, very extremely weak state. That is Kautilya's logic, right? And India, our empires, our kingdoms, and then modern India, we have never been extremely weak, right? We've been somewhere in the middle, and now we are rising in the Narendra Modi era to become a leading power. So to me, it feels like it's a natural choice that we should opt for autonomy rather than for bandwagoning, and there is even our epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata also, there are so many examples where the strategic choices are made in such a way that it preserves the autonomy and the freedom for the ruler or for the king, isn't it?
So true. That lies in our soul, being Indians. So you quoted Ramayana, Mahabharata, I spoke about Arthashastra, and when we come to the modern times, all those values, philosophy, and this choice for maintaining autonomy at any cost of a state reflects in our foreign policy. So in Narendra Modi era, that is what we have seen, that how when he practiced it, we could not only manage to build up good relations with nations pertaining to different blocks. For example, we were always branded as a natural ally, a very good strategic partner of Russia for years. And somewhere down the line, it always worked as an irritant when it came to our relations with United States of America. Agreed. But in past couple of years, I would say especially from 2016-17 onwards, you can see a new chapter in our relationship, wherein not only we identified common elements to be worked in a strategic partnership, we also made it clear that maintaining good relationship with Russia is what we will continue with. And that is what in all these years our Honorable Prime Minister and our External Affairs Minister kept stating from different platforms. And that's what US respects also today. So when our Prime Minister recently visited Russia, there were some voices that all of us heard from United States of America. But as the head of the state, Biden not only welcomed this trip, he said that US has, as in, nothing to do with what India is doing with Russia, or Prime Minister Modi is visiting Russia, because they respect India's strategic autonomy. And even after Second World War, or when we got independence, even at that point in time, when you see Professor Chaulia, we were not as in terms of power, we were not very powerful. At that point in time also, we never chose to bandwagon. We did not go and hide behind any of the superpowers. We maintained our neutrality.
True. Viewers, Dr. Anshu Joshi has already spoken about the Russian factor and the division of the world. We are living in a highly polarized world order with apparently two camps out there. And on this point, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, spoke in Bratislava in Europe in 2022 on stage, and was asked why is India not taking a siding with one of these two camps, the Western camp or the Chinese/Russian camp. Let's watch his very interesting and powerful rebuttal of this idea that India should be a camp follower. He's challenging that view. Let's watch Dr. Jaishankar and continue the discussion.
This idea that, your grand strategy must be about how you will choose. I will do what, as all of us do. I will weigh the situation, everybody, after all, how do countries eventually make decisions?
Mr. Jaishankar, there will always be two axes at this point. I think it's an understood, accepted fact that you have the West, US-led, you have China as the next potential axis. Where does India fit into this? But are you planning to not pick a side?
No, I'm sorry. That is exactly where I disagree with you. This is the construct you are trying to impose on me, and I don't accept it. I mean, I don't think it's necessary for me to join this axis or not, and if I'm not joining this, I must be with the other one. I don't accept that. I mean, I think I'm 1/5 of the world's population. I am today the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. I mean, forget the history, civilization bit, everybody knows that. But I think I'm entitled to have my own side, I'm entitled to weigh my own interests, make my own choices. And my choices will not be cynical and transactional, but they will be a balance of my values and my interests. There is no country in the world which disregards its interests.
So viewers, Dr. Jaishankar really hard-hitting and saying that values and interests, both of these matter, and every country makes compromises between these two. And that what he's saying is international relations is not really a morality contest. And I'm with Dr. Anshu Joshi. Anshuji, we just heard External Affairs Minister essentially pointing to the hypocrisy of this whole argument that by continuing to treat Russia as a strategic partner, we are doing something immoral. And he's saying that, frankly, who is moral? In other words, he's actually challenging the very, he's trying to undermine the very logic of the argument. And, I'm often reminded of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the great American leader, who once said about a Latin American dictator. He was asked, how come the United States is a democracy? How come it's close to this dictator? He says, he may be a bastard, but he's our bastard. That's exactly the language of President Roosevelt, right? And they have always done this kind of, hard-nosed realpolitik, Western powers, be it the Europeans or the Americans, right? And they've always dealt with, quote-unquote, the devil when it suited them. And even more recently, you see President Biden, for example, he had this, when he came in, he said that Mohammed bin Salman, the ruler of Saudi Arabia, is like a pariah, and I'm going to make him pay the price. And then he actually went to Riyadh and did a fist bump with him and did business with him, right?
Yes.
You have President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi of Egypt. There are a lot of, authoritarian rulers around the world with whom the Western countries have very close alliances and partnerships, right? But then there is no moral outrage. But when our Prime Minister goes to Russia, there is suddenly this, brouhaha, especially in the Western media and to a lesser extent, even in the US government circles. So there is this double standard, right? And that needs to be exposed because India is not in any way compromising on values, certainly not more than what Western countries do.
So we have to understand that for all these years, most of the European powers, how they ruled over the world. It was the time when power meant hard power, territorial power, colonial power. And all these colonial powers today talk about democracy and democratic values.
Human rights,
isn't it?
morality,
Human rights, yes. So isn't it oxymoronic? So a country that took over Brazil, Portugal went there and took over Brazil as a colony, and later when they needed slaves for their sugarcane fields and all that, they got it from Africa and other parts of the world, from Asia also. And today all those countries talk about human rights, different types of rights, democratic values, people's choices, and so on. But on the other hand, they go and try to make a narrative in the minds of people belonging to that particular country, and that's what has happened with India. So even after achieving independence, I think we could not make our people independent in terms of our mindsets, and we were left with the colonial mindsets. So right from the color of our skin to the choices that we need to make in terms of our foreign policy, with whom should we be standing, to not taking decisions in terms of growing as a power. I mean, first and foremost, why should we be branding ourselves as an underdeveloped nation? So that's where I think what our external affairs minister keeps stating from different platforms, that first and foremost, and I really love that, first and foremost, without mincing his words, he states that please respect our sovereignty and our decisions, because that is our strategic autonomy to align with anybody we would like to align to. But then he clarifies that we believe in Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam and we believe in global peace and security. So we would be the last nation to go and threat some nation or attack on some other nation. And then he says that you remember that dialogue wherein he clearly answered Ursula Won's kind of warning that she gave to us, that we should not buy oil and gas from Russia.
Yeah.
And that was the peak time of Russia-Ukraine war, and most of the Western countries, especially in Europe, they had stepped back from buying oil and gas from Russia, and they had to pay a hefty price by paving a way for economic crisis in their own countries because of this. But that's what our external affairs minister clarified to Ursula von at that point in time, that madam, you do your business and we will do ours. So it's up to us what we would like to do, and we continue doing business with Russia.
Yeah, so this patronizing tone doesn't really work, because India is rising and we are not willing to take it lying down also. We are
so true.
Punching back. But Anshuji, talking of strategic autonomy, another current example apart from Russia is Iran.
Yes.
This is a country that's been heavily sanctioned by, I think, one of the most sanctioned countries in the world.
Yes,
and
true.
they have had a long politics and competition with the US and Israel and other players in the region, right? So still, in spite of all this and the threat of more and more sanctions, India went ahead and in 2024, we have signed a 10-year long-term agreement to run the Chabahar port,
yes,
which is strategically important for us and also commercially and all those things. And again, we showed that irrespective of this Damocles' sword, so-called, of Western sanctions, we will not be deterred when it comes to core interests, and we'll pursue our autonomy. And we have in many ways also tried to convince the Americans that there's no way they can sanction India, just because we went for a strategic partnership to advance our strategic partnership with Iran. There's no way the US can afford to sanction India, right? So there is a bit of the Chanakya Niti that we are playing here all along, isn't it? And where we are showing that we know that we can make choices, and we are boldly making choices because we know we have also become more indispensable. And it's not easy for any country. The last time the US sanctioned India, our viewers will remember, was way back in 1999 after the nuclear test. And that is history. That's 25 years ago, right? So it's just not possible in today's configuration with these divisions. So in a way, we know how important we are, and therefore we are able to leverage our strategic autonomy, it seems, with a country like Iran much more boldly than before, isn't it?
So true. And I will add 2 points to what you have said. I totally agree with you, what you have said. First and foremost, when we look at Iran and this development of Chabahar port, more than us, it's important for United States of America. Because, relations are sour between United States of America and Iran. So US cannot go and do anything about this Chabahar port. But to answer aptly to this Belt and Road initiative of China, and we all know how China has already spread its feet across all
West Asia, the Middle East.
Yes. So it's very important for all the other nations to give a befitting reply to this, plan or this strategy of China. And for that, India had come up with this, agreement with Iran already to develop this Chabahar port, not only to increase infrastructural connectivity among the nations to come up with resilient supply chain, but diplomatically, that's the reason. And that's where US should support India. Because by and large, nowadays, the entire world knows that how more than India depends on United States of America. This is my second point. United States of America depends on India for many things, and this is one of those, laundry items.
Absolutely. And viewers, the bigger point is, there was a time when India was seen as a swing state that could turn the tide or tilt the balance in favor of either China or the US, the two current technology great powers. But what we are saying is that India is on its way to becoming a third great power, or what we call a leading power. So there is no way we will be seen as a junior partner either of this side or of that side. People often forget strategic autonomy is not only vis-a-vis the US and Western countries, it's also vis-a-vis the other great power center of the world today, which is China. And on this, I have a very interesting video for you to watch about a US congressional delegation that came to India to meet the Dalai Lama and the Tibetan administration in Dharamsala. And China was livid and outraged by it, but India went ahead and enabled this visit to happen. So again, we have exercised our strategic autonomy, this time vis-a-vis China. Let's watch this very interesting video clip and continue the discussion. So viewers, India hosted this very interesting US congressional delegation. Anshuji, not only did the US congresspersons go to meet the Tibetan, Central Tibetan administration and the spiritual leader Dalai Lama, but also Dr. Jaishankar, our External Affairs Minister, hosted the congressional delegation. Prime Minister of India, Modi ji himself also hosted this visiting delegation, and both our topmost figures in foreign policy said in public that we want this, the strategic partnership with the US to develop further. So it was, and the Chinese are very angry, and they have been, upset about this, and they say that, India should just hand over the Dalai Lama, or that we should just disband the, Tibetan refugee community here and all those things. So, but we have never succumbed to that, and now increasingly, and they also often object to even a Twitter exchange between Prime Minister of India and the newly elected President of Taiwan. The Chinese say that India is crossing the red line. If we do military exercises with the US, which are for national security reasons, the Chinese say this is violation of bilateral agreements. And India has shot back that no country, certainly not China, has a veto over our choices and our our options. And I think there also we are being very firm, isn't it? The way we have pushed back the Chinese aggression and attempts at expansionism and domination, that is also strategic autonomy, right? We are balancing, we are not bandwagoning.
Definitely, and at the same time, we are also not falling to Chinese maneuverings. So you see, in today's times, what China is very smartly doing. On one hand, he comes as an aggressor to the borders of India and keeps attacking our borders. That is like a direct attack, but indirectly what it is practicing. So it's not only about its Belt and Road Initiative. You must have heard about, and you must be knowing about the string of pearls strategy also. By doing so, it's trying to encircle India in this Indian Ocean and beyond region. It's also practicing similar tactics in Indo-Pacific region also, and that's the reason it's not only about India. It's also about what is happening to South Korea, or for that matter Japan, and other countries belonging to East Asia and Southeast Asia. And now China is understanding it very well, that how by supporting India and all these countries, and that's what it alleges, that US actually tries to contain China. But it is understanding it very well that US is helping all these nations on one hand, whatever the reasons could be. On the other hand, China is understanding that because of this bonding, not only the bilateral bonding between India and the United States of America, but the multilateral bonding that is building up in this particular region. It would not be coalitions. So you look at Quad and other, similar formations in Indian Ocean region. We have this Indian Ocean Region Association where India pioneered it, and we came up with this Sagar strategy, strategic growth for
security
and growth for all. Yes. So what now China wants from India is to stay away diplomatically from all such kind of maneuverings, including what it has done to Tibet, or for that matter, what it has done to Taiwan. And that's where we are very vocal. And that's where our strategic autonomy is coming into picture, wherein we are saying that it's not only about strategic autonomy of India, it's also about strategic autonomy of other nations, including Taiwan and Tibet. And that's where we are putting China into the spot. So it's an entire diplomatic game, wherein now the world can see China into the spot, and that's why China is retaliating.
Very true. So viewers, the sum of this discussion with Dr. Anshu Joshi is that India is not only defending its own sovereign strategic autonomy, which goes back in our strategic culture to millennia, but also doing so for smaller countries in the region that need to hold their head high and not become enslaved to any hegemonic external player. And therefore, the counterbalancing or the pushback that we try to do both at our level and also collectively for others is so important. Anshuji, the developing countries also, we have been voicing their concerns. There also it's a kind of like upholding the strategic autonomy of the global south, as you've said and written. So viewers, the point is India is the beacon and probably the most successful case of a developing country that has managed to hold on to its strategic autonomy without forsaking it under external pressure. And therefore, the stature of India is a lot higher in the world today. Had we become a treaty ally of the United States, had we bandwagoned to China, just imagine we would, our stature would be seen as secondary, not as a primary one that is going to rise to the level of a leading power. But we are now very determined to sustain this strategic autonomy going forward. Maybe in 10-15 years time, when we ourselves become a leading power, we don't have to even worry about strategic autonomy for ourselves, because we would be so much more powerful. But while we are rising, we are still weaker compared to the two big powers of our time. So we will need to continue to emphasize on strategic autonomy for ourselves, but more importantly, as Dr. Joshi was saying, also for the other smaller players, because India is the voice of the global south. Let me thank Dr. Joshi for valuable insights and for thought-provoking
it was
news.
A very interesting show wherein we could discuss and we could touch all these dimensions that together put India as, a Vishwa Guru by practicing this strategic autonomy, by bringing this issue of democratization of mighty platforms like G20, wherein we included African Union to G20, and by speaking on behalf of Global South, which is in need of the hour. Thank you so much for inviting me to the show.
Thank you, Anshuji. So viewers, strategic autonomy is a concept that many countries profess, but few have been able to practice it the way India has. So it is a model in strategic autonomy, and increasingly even the most skeptical voices who continue to attack India are waking up to realize that it's a different world order where what we are doing is not only for ourselves but also setting an example to make a more democratic world order. So let's keep focusing on strategic autonomy, because this theme is going to continue to resonate in India's foreign policy in times to come. I'll see you again next time. Until then, take care.